My guest today is Spider One. He's a singer, songwriter, record producer, and the mastermind behind the band Powerman 5000, whose sound and stage shows fuse electronic metal, sci-fi spectacle, and high-octane action rock that turned the page into the future after a decade of grunge. Behind his signature voice and spaceman swagger is a visionary artist who turned science fiction theatrics into platinum records. He has a shock of blonde hair and a sneer to rival Billy Idol, but where Idol cyberpunk depicts the future as a dystopian wasteland, Cyber One sees punk rock take to the stars, careening through the galaxies. It's a future where we may never get jetpacks, but at least we have Powerman 5000. But it's not all rockets and robots with my guest. Spider One is also the screenwriter, producer, and director behind a new strain of independent horror. Showcased in his films and short stories written for the narrative podcast Bleeder's Digest, in a departure from the futurism in his musics, the movies frequently deal with ancient terrors and themes dark and primal. His films are Allegoria, Bury the Bride, the new Little Bites, and the upcoming Big Baby. I cannot recommend them enough. Run, don't walk to see them. Spider, it's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. Yeah, makes me feel like I've actually put some effort into my life. So thank you for that. Yeah.
It is hard to compete with the Boo Crew, though.
Well, they are the kings of over flattery. Let's just put it that way.
Your parents are Robert and Louise Cummings. They've been described as very matter of fact and nice to everyone. Your father worked in a furniture factory for years, and your mother worked in sales for a time, but was primarily a housewife and mother. They lived in a two-story house on Pond Street in Haverhill, Massachusetts, when your brother, Robert Bartley Cummings, was born in 1965.
Yeah.
2 years later, you were born Michael David Cummings on August 25th, 1967. It was a Friday. Yours was an all-American family living in a small New England town blocks away from the Merrimack River. What were you like as a young child, and what was it like growing up in Haverhill?
Wow. Well, I think I still have that shirt actually from that. Just no, that's so cute. Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny. It's actually pronounced Haverhill, which is weird. It's such a
Haverhill.
Well, it's a Massachusetts thing. It's like none of the towns are pronounced as they're spelled out. So it's like it should be Haverhill, but it's Haverhill, and yeah. So anyway, no worries with that. But yeah, I mean, it was sort of a quintessential New England working class existence. But it was kind of devoid of unlike living in Los Angeles, and I have kids who grew up in LA, where anything's at your disposal. Throw a rock, you're hitting a movie theater or a club or something cool. In Haverhill, there was none of that really. I mean, it was not very art centric at all. So for myself and my brother, really the TV was the window to the world. So we spent a lot of time watching TV and movies and collecting comic books, and that was the kind of those were the things that made me want to explore things beyond this small town. I mean, I think there are definitely two kinds of people that grow up in a small town: those that embrace it and want to stay there for their entire life and marry their high school sweetheart or whatever, and those of us that want to get out and explore. And that was definitely the second of those two things.
What's Under the Bed is an interview show where I explore my guest's biography, career, and the things that shaped what scares them. Before the influence of movies, what scared you the most as a child? Was there a ghost in the attic or a monster under the bed?
I mean, I don't know if I ever was really that scared of stuff. I mean, I think that there were probably, like all of us as kids growing up, there were really weird little things that would scare you. I remember, I do remember one thing that scared the crap out of me. So I was probably 5 or 6 years old, and I begged my mom to buy me this talking Cat in the Hat doll. It was about 2.5, 3 feet tall. You pulled the string and it said things to you. That wasn't the scary part. The scary part was it came with a Cat in the Hat poster, 6 foot high Cat in the Hat poster, and I couldn't wait to hang this on my bedroom wall, and I was so excited until the lights went out. and I could see just a glimmer of this poster with the moonlight hitting it. And I distinct, this is one of the earliest memories I have as a child, is screaming for my mom to come take this terrifying Cat in the Hat poster down, and never put it back on the wall again. So it is interesting that the things that will scare you as a kid, you know.
Yeah. Many kids are first introduced to horror through fairy tales or children's stories like Hansel and Gretel or Three Billy Goats Gruff. Was there a particular fairy tale or children's story that scared you or fascinated you as a child?
I think I can't say that traditional fairy tales that I remember anyways being a big part of my attraction to horror. It was again, it was more through television. It was where I grew up, there was look, you got to understand, like, I'm old enough where there was before cable, and we had like four channels, right? And we had a local TV channel, channel 56, and they had a thing called Creature Double Feature on the weekends, and I think it was Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon, and they would play two horror movies. And so this really was my first experience with anything scary. And they wouldn't play anything crazy. It would be like old Godzilla movies, the original King Kong, or a lot of 50s stuff like I Was a Teenage Werewolf and things like that. And so those were the things that started to seep into my consciousness. And then also books. We would go out and buy a book, the 100 greatest horror movies, and half of them I'd never seen because I had no means to see these movies, but I would see the images from them, and those images would really just fascinate me.
You and your brother experienced the tail end of the 1960s monster boom that spilled over into the 1970s with shows like Scooby-Doo, Sigmund and the Sea Monster, and reruns of The Munsters. Before high school, you'd occupy your time collecting comic books, watching movies and television. Your first band t-shirt was of the Monkees, the band from the television musical sitcom. I read Peter York was your favorite band member, and the Beast was your favorite comic book character. You taught yourself to draw by mimicking comic artists like George Perez, who drew for the Avengers, or John Buscema of Fantastic Four. You consumed hours of science fiction and horror movies by watching Channel 56,
There you go.
WLVI's Creature Double Feature. You'd also scour the aisles of the local video store for the scariest VHS cover arts to take home. Did your parents have any restrictions on what you were able to watch as a kid, and was there any favorite VHS cover art of yours?
It's funny. I don't remember my parents ever saying no to us watching anything, but I don't know if that was, I'm not sure why that was. Maybe they just didn't pay attention to what we were watching, or we were really sneaky about it, or the fact that we didn't seem to be homicidal maniacs, so maybe they thought it was okay. Yeah, but they would, or maybe we were just both a pain in the ass and just complained so much that they just let us do whatever we wanted. But yeah, we watched. I don't remember any real restrictions. In fact, I mean, we would go to the theater. We would beg my parents to take us to see movies that, you know, we probably shouldn't have been seeing at the time as kids. I saw the original Alien in the theater. I saw The Shining in the theater. I saw all these, so, and I was probably 9 or 10 years old. Clearly, I guess they figured we were mature enough to handle it. So yeah, and I don't remember any real restrictions as far as artwork on VHS. I mean, they were all so cool. I think one that comes to mind, well, maybe there were two. One was Basket Case, which always was just like, what the fuck is this? And then when I was growing up, there was this sort of legendary thing called Faces of Death, which was, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but it was a VHS of real, it's basically what the internet is now,
Yeah.
right? Like just watching real people get murdered or get hit by a train or eat monkey brains, so, it's just one of those things that was, was sort of a rite of passage to watch Faces of Death. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that movie for some reason keeps coming up in conversation with me recently.
Yeah, I think
It's
it's one of
really
those things that if you're of a certain age, you absolutely remember Faces of Death.
cool. All right, hold on. You and
Uh-oh.
your brother were close in age, and I've heard you say there was very little sibling rivalry. In fact, you shared many of the same interests and were like friends growing up. For Halloween, you'd build graveyards in the backyard or a haunted maze in your garage, and charge neighborhood kids a quarter to go through and jump out at them. To record your favorite movies off the television, Rob would film the screen with a Super 8 camera while you recorded the sound on a tape recorder. Soon, you're making little Super 8 movies in the backyard, a process your brother said could be heartbreaking, particularly one time when the film came out black. What do you think is a good age for kids to explore horror movies, and do any of those Super 8 movies still exist?
I mean, honestly, I think as early as possible. I'm not a believer in teaching your kids to be scared, or teaching them an interest in anything is is wrong or age restrictive. Of course, there's certain content that it's not appropriate for all ages. But I think if there's certainly a lot of great entry points for even little kids. I have a daughter who's 5 and she loves horror movies. I mean, I won't let her watch anything that feels too grounded or real, but she loves, watching Freddy Krueger and Jason and any kind of character based stuff. I think it's just entertaining to her. And as far as being creative, I mean, there is no time to wait. If you're 5 years old and you want to start, picking up a phone and filming something I mean, it's infinitely more easy now for a kid to be creative and make stuff. Um, I started drawing my own comic books when I was, I want to say 6 or 7 years old. And in my mind, I had created a comic book company. I was going to compete with Marvel and DC, even though it was only me, you know, in my bedroom drawing these really janky, comic books. But I would make these, 10, 12 page sequential stories. And I realize now, looking back, I really was just prepping myself to make movies. I was storyboarding these stories with characters and scenarios. And so if you have the creative bug, there's no time to waste. Just get to work and do it. It all adds up. The things that you do when you're young that may seem, disposable, I think all just lead up to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So it is all of value. So the younger the better, I say.
Do any of those Super 8 movies still exist?
Good question. I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think over the years they got transferred to VHS and then maybe transferred to DVD or something. I mean, Rob was really ahead of me in that regard. I mean, I would always try to emulate. You'd mentioned the Monkees, and I was a kid, I used to love to watch the Monkees TV show. And that would be something that me and my friends would do. We would sort of like emulate, I guess, an early version of a music video. you know Rob was more, I seemed, and he tried to make an Escape from New York short film. So he has him dressed as Snake Plissken. So he was taking it to a whole other level. But I don't know if they exist. That's a good question. They might somewhere. My comic books definitely still exist. I've saved them after all these years, which is pretty amazing. I have them in a cardboard box in storage. So
I came across two stories in my research that may have contributed to you and your brother's penchant for horror. Rob tells a story: you were playing in the front yard when a naked man with stab wounds ran by the house. He says the event left you pretty shaken up. Then I heard the movie Jaws scared Rob so much he was afraid to go into the bathroom. What do you remember about the bloody naked guy and Rob's toilet shark?
yeah, I mean, these are memories and just seared in your. I don't know why you remember not the bad things, but the traumatic things, and then you don't remember. Yeah, no, the naked, stabbed, bloody guy. I remember it very clearly. It was a beautiful summer afternoon, summer vacation. I'm sure we were all home. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my parents having a sandwich for lunch. And from the outside in front of my house, I just heard this sort of moaning. And at first it didn't register what it was. And then it became clear to me that it wasn't, someone goofing around or a kid. It sounded like someone was in distress. And I remember going to the front door, opening the front doors. I don't remember. I was a little kid, and just seeing in clear sunlight this naked man, just blood red, gripping his side and moaning. I just shut the door and like ran back to my parents. I didn't know what to do. It was stunning. And then apparently someone called the police and an ambulance came. And then the next memory I have of that is my neighbor across the street, just with his garden hose, hosing the blood off the street. So yeah, so that stuck with me for sure.
God.
And the Jaws one, yeah, we went to see Jaws when it first came out in 1975, and it was terrifying. You know, it was terrifying to all of us. And then we went for dinner afterwards, and yeah, I remember Rob being terrified to go and use the restroom in the because he thought the shark was going to, you know, come out of the toilet and devour him.
Less than 2 miles north of your childhood home sits a 20-acre plot of land that holds over 4,000 burial plots. Established in 1859, the Hilldale Cemetery is said to be haunted by the men and women who first settled the area. Soldiers from the Revolutionary War, the Sioux Wars, and the Civil War are buried there. Visitors have reported witnessing apparitions of soldiers in the area known as Soldiers Hill. Others report feeling sudden cold spots or drops in temperature, as well as feeling the presence of an unseen entity. Local teenagers brave enough to visit at night would claim to see partial body apparitions, shadow figures moving around, and knocks on doors when no one is there. Over the years, there have been tales of a lady in white and heads coming out of the ground. Paranormal investigators claim the area around what the locals call the hanging tree is active with EVPs. Did you ever hear about the Hilldale Cemetery, or were there other urban legends you heard about growing up in Haverhill? Or
Wow,
Haverhill?
this is new to me. I didn't realize this was such a haunted situation. There is, well, there are many cemeteries in Haverhill. There was one I don't, I think that, I don't know if this is the one you're talking about, but we were essentially lived 2 blocks from a cemetery. Um, and it was just our playground. It was our, we would go throw a football around, or we'd bring a girl to the cemetery to, you know, hang out with, or, and it was a direct route to our elementary school. So we would walk through the cemetery to school and back home. That was just normal everyday life. Um, I do remember, I don't remember any haunting situations as far as that I'm concerned with, but we had an interesting thing. We were doing some yard work in our home, and there was a rock, what seemed to be a big rock in the yard, and we unearthed it and flipped it over, and it was actually a gravestone. So it makes me wonder if that graveyard was actually at one point larger and
Oh
these
my God.
homes were built over it. So yeah, I don't know, like, you know, sort of a poltergeist situation. So that could certainly be a reality. Yeah, that was pretty crazy, which, you know, we just
That's
thought it was like you know, a part of a walkway or something, but it ended up being an ancient gravestone.
wow. Have you
Yeah.
ever experienced anything you would consider supernatural, and what are your thoughts on the subject?
100%. Not in Haverhill, but since moving to LA, you know, I was always, when it comes to anything with supernatural or religious, or I'm always of the mindset, my answer to everything is like, I don't know, possibly, yeah, maybe. Are there ghosts? Maybe, yeah. Um, but I can tell you 100% that now I believe that ghosts, or whatever you want to call them, ghosts, entities, people from another dimension, alien, are 100% real. Because KRSY FOX, who is, you know, my partner and in movies, and she lived in a building called the Broadway in the heart of Hollywood. It's right on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and Vine. And it's an old building now converted into lofts, and it used to be a department store, very famous department store. Um, and her loft was completely haunted. There were things that happened there that there's no explanation. You know, you keep find things happen, and you find 3 or 4 things that, well, maybe it could be this, and it just started to escalate to the point where it's like, there's no way this is not real. um I could go into details, but we'd be here for another hour. But if anybody's interested in those stories, I actually did an entire podcast on my buddy's podcast called the Bigfoot Collectors Club. I don't know if you ever heard of those guys, and
I
I
think so,
go
yeah.
I go over all the details of it. But yeah, I mean, I'm a firm believer after then. We had other instances too. I feel like um and I don't want to jinx her, but sometimes I think that maybe Chrissy is a haunted person. And I don't know if this is a real thing, but because she's had experiences in other houses, then we had the experience in the loft, and then we moved in together and we had more experiences. And mind you, I've never had any before I met her. So I wonder if maybe there's an entity that just kind of follows her around, which is terrifying. Um, just the idea of that in itself. So, but to answer your question, yes, I have, and I definitely believe.
You attended Haverhill High School, go Hillies. The school and the characters in the Archie comics are based on Haverhill High School, class of 1940. One could even say you went to Riverdale High School. You drew illustrations for the school newspaper. You were part of the class book committee covering modern music masters, and I read you may have performed in a play called Don't Drink the Water. It was at this time when you discovered music, listening to the Go-Go's in your friend Joel Murphy's basement. A light bulb went off. You were going to start a band. You would take the train to Boston to catch local acts. You bought a bass guitar for $15 and formed a hardcore band called Vital Interest. You performed at talent shows, and in 1983, the band released a tape called Hey, What Are You Looking At? It was recorded live onto a cassette into a boombox set up in your parents' living room. What were you like in high school, and how much of your high school experience informs who you are today?
Yeah, I always describe my high school experience. I was in high school in the mid 80s, which, I really felt like I was living a John Hughes movie, The Breakfast Club, or it really felt like that to me. And yeah, I discovered punk rock in high school, and it really changed my whole life. It changed the way I looked at the world, the way that I approached art, the DIY ethic. When you grow up in a small town like I did, a fairly small town, there isn't really a sense that these wonderful things that go on in the world are in anything within your grasp, right? Like when I would listen to the radio and hear, whatever was popular at the time, those people seemed like just creatures from another planet that create, or if I went to see a movie or watch TV, I really had no sense that I could in any way be a part of this, right? Like the only thing that maybe I thought I had a shot at was drawing for comic books, because that seemed
Mm-hmm.
sort of like, well, that seems reasonable. Maybe I could do that. So when I discovered punk rock, it's such a different attitude, and it really was. It was a collective of bands that really had no commercial potential and no way to get a record deal, or no way to really, not like a clear path to success. So these bands would just make their own records, make their own album covers, put their own shows together at the local VFW hall, whatever it took to create and to put whatever message they
Yeah.
had out in the world. They would find a way, and that really was a huge light bulb moment for me, and which I still carry to this day, even with making these movies. They're very punk rock. It's very do it yourself. We just have the good fortune of having a lot of really talented friends that can assist us. But yeah, I mean, that was really, I don't remember what the question was, but I think that punk rock and discovering these things turned me into who I am today. Oh, so what kind of, so I am, as a student and as a young adult, I embraced that rebelliousness.
Mm-hmm.
We would, you know unlike, maybe someone who feels like they're an outsider, who wants to fit in, me and my small group of misfit friends embraced not fitting in. We loved it. We loved getting into confrontations with the guys on the football team. We loved that people thought we were weird. We loved people screaming that we were freaks at us, as we walked around a town. So something that I helped me gain a ton of confidence. And I, it's just such I really am forever indebted for discovering those kind of bands.
In an age of bullish COVID lockdowns and active shooter drills, do you think horror movies can provide catharsis for teenagers coping with these real world fears?
That's a great question. I mean, I think there's always that's sort of like the main question people like to ask is, why do people like to watch horror movies, right? Like, why would we put ourselves in a scenario where we will be scared or feel uncomfortable? And it's funny, I'd never really figured out the reason why, and I really don't even know the reason why for me. Maybe you have a reason for being attracted to stuff like that.
Mm.
I don't know. I mean, I know why I like to make it. Creatively, I think there's a very few genres that you can sort of experience all levels of filmmaking.
Mhm.
You can do very dramatic things. You can delve into effects. There's a lot. There aren't too many areas where you can play around in so many things with so many things, but I suppose I mean, I do think that, I think your point is on the nose in terms of this idea of survival and getting through something, and with the safety net of it's just a movie, it's
Yeah.
almost like going on a roller coaster, I suppose. You're terrified, but you are reasonably convinced that it's going to be okay at the end, something
Mhm.
crazy happens. So I suppose that's part of it. And I think also horror movies, um, they share a similar cultural and societal aesthetic as punk rock and heavy
Mhm.
metal. Is that I think it just feels good to be a part of something that feels a little bit outside the norm, that a little taboo, that maybe not, you can gross out your friends or your mom or whatever. And I think there's something kind of fun about that as well. And it 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 is built around a community, which I think is really exciting for a lot of people. I think that, as we know, that people that are attracted to this kind of stuff maybe don't fit in the norm situations of the world, but you find your tribe. You go to a horror convention, or whatever it is, or you go see a horror movie and you feel like, oh wow, there are other people like me. And I think that
Yeah.
that's exciting for a lot of people.
Legend has it you formed a band called Spider Baby. It was short lived, but the name Spider stuck. In 1990, you moved to Boston to attend the School of the Museum of Fine Arts on scholarship. You drop out after a few months and buy a cheap 4-track home studio and drum machine.
Oh my God, I was gonna say,
With producer Lorne
if you had the drum machine, I was gonna.
With producer Lamar Louder, you record the 12-inch single Much Evil. You received local success, including winning the Boston Phoenix WFNX 1990 Readers Poll for Best Rap Act. Then in 1991, you founded
Oh,
Powerman 5000.
yeah,
This
there we
is
go.
a blown up version of the original that's right here,
Amazing.
from the streets of Boston. um, you draw the art for the flyers like this one.
Yep.
Advertising shows at clubs like Paradise BT the Bears and Rathskeller, also known as the Rat. Um, Powerman 5000 became a local favorite and made waves in its indie debut EP True Force and the Blood Splat rating system, which this is straight from 1994.
Yeah, it sure is. It's amazing.
You land a record deal with DreamWorks, and the band moves to Los Angeles. Then you release Mega Kung Fu Radio and Tonight the Stars Revolt, which goes platinum. Decades later, and there have been a dozen records with highlights, including 2003's Transform, 2014's Builders of the Future, and this year's Abandoned Ship. Do you think more songs have been written about love, lust, or heartbreak?
Oh wow. Okay. Love, lust. Uh, wow. I think that's a good question, because I don't think I've written too many about any of those subjects, but unless, let me say, I would say heartbreak maybe is the most famous of categories, but love is it could be just a three-way tie, quite honestly. I was always terrified about writing songs about that kind of stuff. I was like, I've always felt like it's sort of the opposite of what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to write
Mhm.
these songs and put your heart on the line. And I was like, God, I don't know if I can do that, So I tended to write these weird songs that may have those messages abstractly hidden in there some way. But yeah, I think I was always afraid to be emotionally vulnerable in my music. That's why I ended up with a band called Powerman 5000.
Why do you suppose there aren't more protest songs being made these days?
Wow. Well, I don't know. Maybe there are. I think look, protest music generally comes from bands.
Mhm.
Not always. I mean, you can argue Bob Dylan and a lot of historical people that wrote protest songs, but in the band is a dying breed. It's become a dinosaur. I mean, there are just not that many. I mean, there are bands, but they don't seem to. A lot of them don't get past underground status. But I do think that, generally speaking, which is, and I'm only going to speak for American bands because I think in Europe it's an entirely different thing, and
Yeah.
I tend to like bands from Europe more than American bands. But it's funny. I think that the aesthetic and the social and political attitude of American bands has really changed over the years. It used to be, the more radical, the better, the more sort of culturally left, the better, the more, visually strange, the better. When you think about a lot of bands from the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, even 90s in a different way. But I think more recently, a lot of American rock bands have kind of just become country music on steroids. It's sort of like it seems to share more of that aesthetic than anything else. It seems to bands tend to lean more right wing, it seems, in their approach and even in their sound. They definitely been more sort of meat and potatoes kind of rock than being like sonically challenging. So I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just that pendulum will swing, and in 5 or 10 years we'll be back to you know someone like David Bowie or whatever. But right now, for whatever reason, that seems to be where everything's landing.
The band has never shied away from performing cover songs. You covered Good Times Roll from the Cars. Your cover of Relax from Frankie Goes to Hollywood was featured in the movie Zoolander. You released a whole album of covers called Copies, Clones, and Replicants. I have a dream list of covers I think should be done. Jack White should cover David Bowie's song Sorrow. Gwen Stefani would make a great cover of Words from Missing Persons. And I think Rob Zombie would make a killer cover of Sex on Wheels from My Life with the Thrill Kill Cult. What do you look for to cover a song, and are there any songs you'd like to hear someone cover?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how we have done a bunch of cover tunes, and I don't know really. There's no real reason for it. I mean, I hear songs every day that I would be like, wow, that'd be great to cover that. I think I generally go for stuff that had some effect in me as a child or young person. Although there were modern stuff I'd love to give a go at, but sometimes the idea is just, can I reasonably do this, right? Like, there are just some songs that would just be a disaster. Like, I'm not going to attempt to Curtis Mayfield or something, just be like terrible. But so I try to find something that with my limited vocal ability, I can hopefully do some justice to. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a list of cover tunes for other people, but I think it's always most exciting when someone takes a song and kind of turns it on its head, takes a seemingly happy song and makes it sad, or makes, or something that's really heavy and turns it into a ballad. I mean, there are a lot of songs that I mean, and people have done it, but I always thought that Girls Just Want to Have Fun, if you didn't hear the track, is a very sad song. And if you listen to the lyrics, or even Van Halen's Jump seems to me to be a sad song. I don't know. So I think there's an interesting way to just maybe focus on the lyrics and then change the music to suit an entirely different mood.
Worlds collided on October 25th, 2006 at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery when you met KRSY FOX. It was a Wednesday. Of course, KRSY would later become your partner, collaborator, and the mother of your child. Are you all right to share how you came to meet at a cemetery?
Yeah, I mean it was purely by chance. There was an event at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, and anyone who doesn't know or doesn't live in LA, Hollywood Forever is a very famous cemetery that many famous people are buried there, and it's kind of fun just to walk around and read the gravestones. But it also doubles as a place for events during the summer. They show movies there, and they'll have parties there or concerts. I guess that's part of the deal when you get buried there, that you're going to have people dancing on your grave. But you know, we went to something for it was a launch for a video game called Gears of War, which
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a video game guy, so I was like, okay, cool. I got invited to this thing, and I went with a couple of bandmates, and it was really a spectacular party. You would pull up and park your car, and you'd be hustled into the back of an army truck by a bunch of actors dressed as a military with fake guns, and the things were exploding around you, and then they would drive you to the party, and it was really like a spectacular party. Lots of famous people, but I was, being socially weird and awkward, just didn't know who to talk to, so I was just kind of standing around, and I saw KRSY there, and I was just like, oh, and she wasn't talking to anybody, so I think probably made fun of her sweater or something. I called her because she was 20 something. I was like, oh, are you wearing that grandma sweater? Because she just had some sort of blue grandma sweater on. So, and we just started talking and hit it off, and we ended up talking the whole night. But, I mean, full disclosure, we were both married at the time, and we were just, wasn't anything like that. We just were talking about movies and whatnot. And yeah, at the time I was trying to launch this TV show called Death Valley, and I was going to film a sort of a proof of concept for Death Valley, and she was like, "Well, I was just in a movie. I played a vampire." I was like, "Oh wow!" She was in Underworld Evolution. She had a part in Underworld, so I was like, "Well, maybe you can help me with this thing." And she did, and we filmed this proof of concept, and we just became really good friends, and remained friends over the years. And she had moved back to Canada for a while, and I kind of lost contact for a while. And fast forward, I don't even know how many years later, she was divorced, I was divorced, and all of a sudden that friendship changed, seemed very different, and we ended up never leaving each other's side since that day.
I saw you both have matching Hollywood and Vine tattoos. What was your first and last tattoo?
My first tattoo was, okay, so I don't know if I can, is this spider here. So at the time, when I lived in Massachusetts, it's hard to believe, but getting a tattoo was illegal in Massachusetts up until like fairly recently. So we would just go to somebody's apartment, and some guy would have a tattoo gun, and so I got that. Luckily, it sort of looked like a spider and not. So that was my first one. My newest one is, I believe, this Godzilla tattoo right
Well,
here.
that's neat.
Yes.
Aw,
Yeah, it's
it's a little
cute.
guy.
Yeah, I have many good ones. I finally found like a great tattoo artist that I don't like, but I have some really bad ones. Like this spider and this terrible rocket ship that looks like a bowling pin. This is when someone says, "Hey, I'll do a tattoo for free," this is what you get. This one, oddly enough, this weird face. Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit did this one.
Oh.
Yeah, again, one of those times where we're on tour with we were on tour with Primus and Limp Bizkit, and Fred was like, "Hey, I've got a tattoo gun. I know how to." And I'm like, "Okay," So yeah, that's what you end up with. So
I mean, that's still a great
yeah, it's a
story.
good story. So
In addition to music, you directed a number of music videos and short films, and you also created the horror black comedy mockumentary series Death Valley, which aired
yes.
for MTV for one season in 2011. It followed a police force dealing with criminals that were mostly supernatural. The tagline was werewolves, zombies, vampires, and the cops that protect us all. Do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
Well, look, I think fast zombies are like way scarier, right? I think you could like I think in Death Valley, if I we did both because we just like wanted to throw all the rules out because I think there's a sort of a comedic, creepy element to slow zombies, and then a terrifying element, you know, a 28 days
Hmm.
later sort of. So I think you can have I think there's room for both of them depending on the scenario. Yeah. Just like in real life, you got fast people and slow people, you know.
Sure.
I mean, if a 85-year-old man turned into a zombie, he wouldn't suddenly be running. He'd still be slow, I assume, you know.
Hmm. Allegoria becomes your feature debut as writer, producer, and director. Chrissy stars in it along with a friend of the show, Scout Taylor-Compton. Did I hear you forgot to film the ending?
Yeah, this is insane. Like this is where, you know, we were yeah, so we sort of I shot that in 5 different segments because it is a anthology adjacent kind of movie. So I did each shot was each day was a different story. So we got to the end, which was the final story with Chrissy and I was so excited. It was going so well. We just nailed it. Was just the greatest. And so my script was, you know, in such a way where the final page of the script was only like 2 sentences, which was basically like she walks down the hall, sits down on the couch, the 6 notes rise. So I'm like shooting and shooting, and you know, you're sleep deprived, you're shooting 12 hours a day, and we nailed the finale, the final conversation in the bedroom. If anybody's seen it, you know what I'm talking about, but if not, no worries. We get that, and that's a wrap, everybody. We got it. Thank you. Great day. Because I'm an idiot and neglect to turn the page on the script to see there's still, you know. So I get home, so happy with how everything turned out. Chrissy's like, let's celebrate, have a margarita. And so we're sitting down, and I was just like, I think I forgot to film the end of the movie. And she's like, what are you talking about? You're joking, right? And I'm like, no, I'm serious. I forgot to film her walking back to the couch, sitting down. And so I start panicking, you know, because at that point, even to film 10 seconds, I need to assemble everyone back together, camera, sound, makeup. And so I'm instantly on my phone calling everybody and hoping that the location is still available. Luckily, everyone was available. Everyone just laughed at me, and we showed up the next day and got and filmed for like a half hour and got the yeah.
Your next film is Bury the Bride, which you co-wrote with Chrissy. She and Scout play the leads along with another frequent collaborator, Chaz Bono. This movie does so much with so little. It delivers the scares and has a twist you never see coming. You filmed over 7 nights at a location in Lancaster, California. I've heard you describe this as one of your most difficult shoots, which was worse, the snakes, the spiders, or the sand tornadoes?
Well, they were all terrible, but the worst part was the sleep deprivation and having no business trying to shoot this movie in 7 days. I mean, that was insane. I mean, for Scout and Chrissy, the rattlesnake was probably the most terrifying because it reared his head up as we were ready to roll. Um, but the sand tornadoes for me and the camera crew were absolutely the worst. I mean, every day was a nightmare, and every day was us having to figure out how to do something in a way we had never planned, because you know, it'd be a simple scene where we're going to shoot it out here, and you know, you're dealing with 50-mile-an-hour winds, and you can't, there's so much sand blowing you can't even see, so you have to you know, on the fly almost change everything that was in the script. um we had 9 characters. Some scenes, you know, we had all 9 people in the scene, which is an enormous amount of coverage. So it was by night 6, we were trying to film an effect gag that wasn't cooperating because they never do. The blood's not working is a phrase that I hear daily on an effects day, you know. And I remember clearly night 6 thinking to myself, I'm going to lay down on the floor and just curl into a ball and tell everybody I quit. Like, I can't do this anymore. We had no sleep. We would drive home every night because we wanted to leave as much room for cast and crew in the Airbnbs we had rented. So, you know, me and Chrissy would get home every night as the sun was coming up, 5:30, 6 a.m., and have to be back on set, you know, by noon. It was just incredibly difficult. The fact that there is any semblance of a movie in that movie is a miracle, um, because it's just, you know, was such an enormous undertaking. Um, which, if you watch Little Bites, is clearly a direct, you know, response to that movie on how we shot Little Bites.
Well, your latest film is your best yet. Little Bites is a deeply unsettling story about a mother who protects her daughter by allowing herself to be consumed by a relentlessly evil monster. It's a slow burn story filled with dread from the first scene. The performances are stellar, and the details of the creature are ambiguous. One could guess he's a very old and been torturing people for centuries. You filmed it over 12 days, and it features a cast that includes KRSY FOX, John Sklarov, and genre favorites Barbara Crampton, Bonnie Aarons, Heather Langenkamp, and James. And with former guests and friends of the show, Heather Langenkamp and James A. Janice. Who is the first person you show when you finish a screenplay? What about a song?
Who is the first person I show the
Yeah.
screenplay to? Well, I mean, Chrissy's always there as I'm writing, so she's first and foremost to see everything. Um, and with this movie in particular, she made it very clear there was no one else I was going to consider to play Mindy. She was like, "This is a role for me. This is like a dream role, and don't even think about it." So, which I knew she would play it anyway, but and she does an incredible job. Um, because it was, you know, there's a certain relatability to the allegory metaphors in this movie for parenthood that I knew she could really relate to, you know.
Mhm. Um, who would be the first person other than your band that you would show a song to after you finish it?
Oh, yeah, a song. Well, I mean, I think that, I mean, well, Chrissy always, again, is always there when I'm making stuff, so she's going to be the person to hear stuff. Years ago, I would always play my songs for my oldest son. When we start around the time we made the album Somewhere on the Other Side of Nowhere, which songs like Supervillain and V is for Vampire, I would play them for him because I think he was probably like 5 or 6 or 7 maybe at the time. And playing songs for little kids is really a great barometer because they respond to things, you know, little kids respond to music maybe more than adults. And
Mhm.
if they can wrap their head around a hook or concept, then you know that you've got something. Yeah.
You recently wrapped on your new feature, Big Baby. What can we expect to see? When can we expect to see a trailer? And is there anything you can tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited about this movie. I mean, you know, I feel like with each movie, like Little Bites was a reaction to Bury the Bride, and Big Baby is definitely a reaction to Little Bites. I mean, anyone who watches Little Bites quickly realizes it's pretty dark, it's pretty dreary. It does have elements of survival and hope, but it's a dark movie. Um, Big Baby has elements of that, but is in much more fun movie, I would say. I've always been a bit envious of, you know, directors and writers that make slasher movies. You know, you know, we're friends with Damien and obviously Chrissy was in Terrifier, and I watched that. I'm like, God, that's so fun that they do those movies. But I've never really been drawn to make a traditional slasher. You know,
Mhm.
at least whatever I think of that as. You know, your structure of 5 teenagers go on a trip and get, you know, one by one picked off by somebody in a mask. But I did want to play in that world. So Big Baby is what I describe as sort of a meta slasher. You know,
Mhm.
it centers around a horror screenwriter who's sort of struggling for his next idea when he has this horrific nightmare about this character, Big Baby, which is essentially a hulking 6'5" guy in a baby mask, and it's terrifying. And he has this nightmare of Big Baby chopping up his girlfriend into pieces, and she encourages him to pursue this idea, make this his next script. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go well. It goes horribly wrong, and Big Baby starts to infiltrate his real life. Characters from the script start appearing, begging for their lives and begging for survival. And he becomes convinced that the only way to save the ones he loves is to have Big Baby brutally murder these characters in the script. So it becomes this, like I said, this sort of meta descent into madness, yet with great slasher elements. So yeah, when it comes out, I don't know, we've got our first pass done. So I think that, you know, we're definitely looking at next year for release. I couldn't tell you when, but it's really exciting and really, really great. I'm excited about it.
Your voice, your swagger, and your hair are synonymous with Powerman 5000. I have recently begun coloring my own hair. What's your secret to protect your hair from the negative effects of
Oh
coloring?
my God, who knows? I used to have hair just like yours, not that color, but I used to have long hair. But then of course I discovered punk rock. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna, I don't know. Good luck, I suppose, that it hasn't all fallen out at this point. I've been bleaching my hair since I was probably 15, 16, you know, and in ways that I still just do it myself. I don't go to a professional. I mean, people are like, how are you not completely bald? Because I bleach my hair like every month. Um, I don't know, maybe just like you know, praying to the hair gods, like don't, you know, I'd have to completely change my image if I lost it. But yeah, I don't know. You know, because yeah, I don't do anything in particular to do to take care of it, that's for sure. I buy the cheapest shampoo and just bleach it, you know, and cross my fingers.
You're a huge fan of science fiction. You had a gig with FearNet doing interviews at Comic-Con back in the day where you met Mark Hamill. You've said it was a day you would never forget. May I have your support in my ongoing campaign to have Disney create a horror movie set in the Star Wars universe?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I mean, look, sci-fi and horror go hand in hand. I mean, there are both that I love. You know, I'd love to make a science fiction movie, but that generally costs a little bit more money, you know, than a horror movie. But you know, we have, I mean, look, Alien is arguably one of the best, greatest horror movies ever, and but some will argue it's not a horror movie because it takes place in space. I don't know what
What?
your take on that is.
What?
Yeah, no, I think there are people have a hard line about like, well, if it's in space, it's science fiction. It's not a horror movie. But
Well,
in
it's sci-fi horror.
yeah, I mean, it is a monster movie. You know, it is one of the
Yeah.
greatest monster movies ever. So,
Yeah.
um, well, what would be the? I mean, there are elements, and you know, you could even argue in Empire Strikes Back, right? There's some horror elements
Yeah.
in that movie as well. So I think it's
Yeah.
a fantastic idea.
Yeah, it's
They
there's
seem to be going the
elements.
other direction and making it more for kids, but
Yeah.
yeah, they should do a
Ever
R
since the
rated.
90s.
Yeah.
This last question is a Sophie's choice. Two must die so that one may live. And by die, it means more like cease to exist in the past and present. Um, the original television series Star Trek, Stanley Kubrick's film A Clockwork Orange, or HBO's Video Jukebox.
Oh wow. Which these are great. Which one I have to get rid of one?
You have to get rid of
Ne
two.
Oh, two that would never exist. So the original Star Trek, Clockwork Orange, or Video Juke. You know, I know why you asked me that because that was my gateway into God, I hate you for this. Well, I mean, I don't know. This is an impossible task. Like this is an because each would alter the course of my life in some way. What one would have the most? I mean, okay, let's see. I mean, you know, endlessly love Clockwork Orange and Kubrick in general is probably the biggest influence on me in film. But would my life still be relatively the same because all his other movies would exist? Yeah, sorry. So we'll get rid of that. And Star Trek or okay, I'm gonna say we'll get rid of Video Jukebox because
Whoa!
I'm confident, only because I'm confident that I would have discovered that music in a different way had it not been just for that moment. But see, I could be wrong. But the good thing is, like a great horror movie, this isn't real, so nothing's going to happen to me. So I can say it and still, you know, remain the same.
um Is there anything you'd like to ask me before we're done?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm fascinated by well, one, I'm very impressed with this podcast or whatever you call it, podcast, right? Yeah.
It's an interview show, but yeah,
Yeah, interview
podcast.
show. The fact that you I think that I'm sure that most people that have been on this, if not everybody, has been incredibly impressed with your the time and care that you take and the research. And you must own a bunch of crap now that you probably don't even want, like all
So
this.
much stuff.
Yeah.
Wall of stuff over there.
But the good thing is, I think that some of it's valuable. You could probably like that MC Spider 12-inch. You could probably get a free
Yeah.
or so. But yeah, so I mean, I don't. So you're 17.
Yeah, 17.
So
Oh,
this is, feel like, and how long you been doing this for?
since 2 years? Yeah,
Yeah.
two
So like, so this is
years.
incredibly ambitious. So I'm going to ask you because I had a similar, when I was young, I would, if the internet culture was a thing when I was your, I would probably be doing the same exact thing you are. What what inspired you to do this, and is this, do you see this as is this something that you see as a step to something else that you ultimately want to do, or is this something you want to just grow and make as big as possible?
Definitely a step to something I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker, which
Okay.
I am in essence. I just haven't made films, but I want to be a filmmaker. This is a big step on getting to that dream. How I got inspired by it, I've always loved horror movies since I was young, and one of the biggest stories my dad tells me is I was watching Jaws and I saw the shark and I went, "That's a fake shark, right?" And he was so proud of me. We're in a
Yeah.
film family. He was so proud of me when I said that. Um, but I've always loved horror, but I saw the documentary on Kane Hodder.
Hmm.
Um, and I was bullied as a kid and I related a lot to him
Yeah.
being bullied. And I turned to my dad and went, I want to talk to him. I want to meet him. And my dad's like, well, do you want to make it something important, or do you want to just meet him? And I'm like, I'd like to make it something important. And he's like, well, how about you interview him? And I'm like, well, I don't know if I can do that. A few years later, I start the interview. I ask him how many interviews for me to be able to interview you, and he's like five. About 30 later, I finally interview him,
Uh-huh.
and
Amazing.
I'm still going. So
That's awesome. I mean, look here, I mean, I think you will probably find that anyone that you will probably look up to or use as a barometer of where you want to be has probably had a similar existence as you.
yeah,
Whether it's being bullied or feeling like you don't quite fit in and you're not quite sure why. I mean, I think I give you props for having the confidence to use that as inspiration to do something great and positive instead of just, like a lot of people don't have that, right? It just
yeah.
brings them down, and they just feel resentment towards the world. I mean, like I was saying to you, as a kid, I really just relished that role of being unpopular, or not unpopular, but like unliked by a certain segment, because I don't, I maybe wasn't able to articulate it back then, but I knew that meant I was doing something right.
Hmm.
Right. Like if you're the one that's being singled out, then that means there's something about you that is special and that is intimidating the others, right? Like, whether it's, yeah. So, I mean, I think that you always have to take that as a confidence builder. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, it was like, yeah, like the smartest kids were bullied. I'm like, well, they're the smartest kids. So why is that? Why are they the ones being picked on? It's because, the kids that aren't as smart look at that as a threat, and they're like,
Yeah.
so, um, but I think that's what kind of what kind of horror movies do you inspire you, and what would you want your first movie to be?
Well, my favorite horror movie of all time is Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Okay.
That's not the kind of movies I'd be wanting to go for. Actually, I've recently optioned a script for
Oh,
a
wow.
movie that I want because I want to be a producer.
Oh,
Not one
okay.
of
So
the
you're
studio ones,
not
but I want to
interested
be a
in,
producer.
you want to produce, you're not interested in writing or directing.
I'm interested in writing a little bit because I do write sometimes, but I don't have as much ideas for long things for me to be able to think rationally. Yeah, I could be a screenwriter. Like I don't think that. I may write a couple things. I wouldn't be doing that. Directing, I've been interested in the past. I just don't think I have the brain for it. I don't think.
Oh, I think you probably do. Yeah.
But I know I'm good with the stuff producers deal with, and that is something I'm like, I mean, I'd love to do that. A big thing for me to rationalize wanting to be a filmmaker in general, because I get a lot of like, what if this doesn't work out? I'm like, okay, if I want to be a producer, I'll make it work out in the and like
Mhm.
in the area. Filming doesn't work in the area you're in. What if that's the case? And I'm like, I'll make it work. I'm the producer. I can make the movie work with what I need to do. I mean, so I think that helps me a lot with the like confidence in pursuing it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I'd love to make horror. There's horror's always been a favorite of mine. So horror really is the thing that I want to make any kind of.
Have you made one yet? Like even a short film or anything?
I've written a short film. I haven't made the short film yet, but actually, because my school is so nice, they've bought me a camera and sound recording and green screen
Wow.
for me to do my passion. So that's happening this whole year and
That's
next
amazing.
year. So
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, you should make a short film. I mean,
yeah.
it'll, I don't ever recommend people getting into sort of the short film vortex, which is making
Hmm.
a bunch of short films, because ultimately they're great for practice and to
Hmm.
sort of gain confidence and make mistakes so you don't make them when you're, making a feature and you have more money on the line and,
Yeah.
but ultimately you want to move to a feature, right? Because
Hmm.
there's only so much you can do with a short film. Although, you can put in festivals and get feedback, but it's great practice for sure. And the reality is you can be really strategic about what kind of movie you make.
Yeah.
A big mistake a lot of people make is they try to do too much, and
Hmm.
if you can come up with a simple concept with limited characters and locations, you know, you
Yeah.
really could make it for almost no money. You know,
Yeah.
the technology of cameras today and even iPhones, it's incredible, and the lenses that you can attach to your phone. I mean, but just to sort of wrap your head around whether it is directing or producing, just the mechanics of what it
Yeah.
takes to construct a scene, what it takes to construct a schedule, what it takes to construct a budget, all these things. I mean, there are different, producer is a funny term. Most people don't know what a producer does because they do different things and there are different kinds of producers,
Yeah.
There are producers that just put money into a movie, and there are producers that are creative producers that will help you and have a hand in casting and creative decisions and script notes. And then there are producers that are more, just sort of dealing with the mechanics of a budget and a schedule and dealing with the unions if you have to do that. So, and you can do all of the above.
Yeah. Yeah, because I grew up on set. Actually, what's funny is the first ever movie set I was on was I was 2 years old on the set of Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
Oh, no kidding. That's crazy. I was on that
Yeah.
set. You may,
Whoa, crazy.
yeah. What
Uh,
I was there for a couple of days. I remember they were shooting something outside where Scout was like running down a hill screaming, and it was raining out. So that's so funny. Yeah,
yeah, I was at the farmhouse scenes. That's where I was.
okay. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I might. That's crazy. Why did your dad work on the movie or something?
Yeah, he worked on the movie. He was a location assistant, locations assistant. Yeah.
No. Oh, are you in Atlanta now?
Yeah, we're in Atlanta now. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean that's another thing. I mean, if you grow up around it, then you have a much better. It doesn't seem probably so. Like for me, having no connection to it, it seemed like so magical. Like it was, but you seeing that it's actually real probably gave you a lot of confidence in actually being involved with it.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because like my dad grew up with my grandmother doing like Miami Vice and Flight of the Navigator, then he was just the latchkey kid consuming everything. And then I grew up with him doing things from that Halloween 2 to uh, Coming to America, the second Coming to
Yeah.
America, and I kind of got the range of aspects of movies, and I'm like, this is nothing. I
Yeah.
could do this.
Well, that's good for you, man. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, yeah. Well, then get to it, man. The
Yeah,
earlier the better, right? Like think
yeah,
about all the time you have in front of you to just grow and fail and succeed and everything in between, you know.
yeah.
Uh, so you have a script, right? Is it for a
I
feature
do.
or for a
It's a
short?
feature. The script that I optioned is a feature. The script I wrote is short with
Yeah,
two characters in a car. So that's not
perfect. Yeah,
bad. But the feature, it's a little more work, but it's like very little characters. It's a very small thing. It's like two houses,
yeah.
and it's pretty. I think it's pretty good. That's why we optioned it.
Well, yeah. I
Um,
mean, I think that's important. You know, like I mean, that was after the madness of Bury the Bride. You know, was even though on paper it seemed very simple because it was, but yeah, that was with Little Bites. It was definitely like 99% in this one house. Very very contained. Very we was we whether it was cold, sunny, rainy, it didn't matter because we were in that house. So it made the process so much easier, and because I could just focus on the performances and the
mhm.
in the shots instead of like you know trying to deal with the weather and everything else. So
Yeah,
yeah, if you can be strategic like that, it'll definitely help you for sure.
definitely. But yeah, it's been a bit. We can wrap this up. Spider, thank you so much for sitting down with me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, it was an
Um,
amazing time. I appreciate the care and time that you put into this. It was a pleasure, and if you ever want to hit me up and for any thoughts on your own movies, I'm always available. So
Absolutely. That would be awesome. Thank you so much. And I will